Compared to what it could be, I guess. Yeah. Spoke like we're not going to be having people out in the hall.
Okay. I think we're good to go. Good afternoon. It is September 14. I'll call it 3:34 p.m. This is the monthly meeting of the Transportation Commission meeting. First item of business is roll call. Ballard is present. David McKinney. Here. Ryan Lancaster.
Present.
Walter Steed.
Here.
Tracy Hopkins.
Here.
Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Jared Smith.
Present.
All right, Mr. Smith, good. You're on Zoom. I'll make a note. Tom LeClaire. Joseph Leckie. Mr. Hood, he had noticed the last email that he would be absent, did he? Okay, we'll hold that then. Luke Kavanaugh. John Martin.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Martin, I'll note you on Zoom. Thank you. Tony Tisdale.
Present on Zoom, please.
Thank you, Ms. Tisdale. Ian Updike. Ian Updike.
Mr. Chair, he did send me a note. This is the first day of busing for West Ada, so
Okay.
he is busy.
All right, we'll note that as excused. Melissa Taysom.
Here.
Zoom. Thank you, Ms. Taysom. Justin Price. Mr. Price. Mr. Price,
Here.
are you on the Zoom? Thank you. Very good. Second item of business is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lancaster.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Your second?
Second.
We We have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approval of minutes from August 3rd meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lewis?
I have a few comments.
Okay.
Let's start on page 3 of the packet, in approval of the minutes, section 1, second line, says by Commission Lewis. I asked, that's Commissioner.
We need an ER there.
Yes,
You can
please.
buy a vowel and a consonant.
Yes, please.
Okay. Won't cost you.
And then the next page, page 4, last paragraph on the page where we're talking about the golf carts and ATV section. Third line says a section of Cherry Lane, describing where the golf carts are currently allowed. I think that should be changed to something similar to 1 square mile bounded by U-Stick, Cherry, 10 Mile, and Black Cat.
All right, so inside that parentheses, you would like it to read, just strike what's in the parentheses and put your language?
Yes, please.
All right, so you want to say, parentheses, help me out again what it says?
1 square mile,
1 square mile
bounded by U-Stick, Cherry, 10 Mile, and Black Cat.
bounded by U-Stick,
Yes, Cherry, 10 Mile, and Black Cat.
10 Mile, and Black Cat.
Yes, thank you. And then, page 5, top, the first bullet, it talks about the city ordinance about golf carts, UTV, ATVs. It says in 2013, and I have a question. I thought that the original ordinance was in 1994 and amended in 2004. I'm not I don't know that it was changed in 2013, unless I missed something. I'm not sure if someone can help me out on that.
Mr. Lewis, I was looking it up, well, I guess we can't change it because it's on the recording, but an alternative would be the current city ordinance references only golf carts and not UTV.
That works for me. If you just want to take out the year entirely, just say the current city ordinance.
And we got to change the tense on the verb, but
Oh wait, the year appears twice in that bullet in the beginning, and but you can still change both of those to say current city ordinance if you want.
we're waiting for our fact checker.
I did not bring it with me today. Mr. Chairman, I do have one more thing we can go to and come back to this, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Page 6.
Page 6.
The last paragraph before section 8, where it says business was not concluded, I think it was. So I would strike not from that, unless somebody objects. That's it.
Did we pushed on till about 6 o'clock, so doesn't that read correctly?
Well, I don't think so. I think we... I guess it depends if we're talking about that item of... Well, wait a second. Oh, you're talking about needing a motion. Got it. It's so... strike that comment of mine. It's correct as written.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Steed?
I have one myself, if you'd like to go ahead with it, and
Yeah, we're waiting on Mr. Hood. Go ahead, Mr. Steed.
on page 5, item 6, after the first 2 paragraphs, and before the third one, I'm pretty sure that a lady from ITD came to the microphone and spoke about the ITD's position on whether or not fencing or barriers or more than what's there was needed. I remember the conclusion was that their hands were clean, and, they were okay. So some verbiage in there, and I don't have it written, regarding her comments.
So, Mr. Chair, a quick note. So the recording is basically non-existent for that meeting. That's why the minutes are so, there's not a lot of substance here. So my administrative assistant was going off of what she could hear, and she couldn't hear a lot of anything. You can see a couple of notes even in here, like the minutes were, are missing because, so she's going off a lot of my notes, but she couldn't hear the recording. So and just by the way, real quick, we are getting that fixed in this room. So basically after our meeting and through the rest of September and into the first part of October, they're redoing all of our audio systems. So hopefully we won't have this problem, and this whole Zoom and all that should be fixed. But the last couple of meetings have been very sketchy as far as audio, and thus your minutes are not very comprehensive. I can add that, but I'd like you to tell me what you wanted to say, because I don't have any real record of that.
I could write something and send it to the chairman to see if it agrees with his memory, and no criticism intended in my comment.
Mr. Chairman, just to address that, it was, the person who was here was, Jamie Kuntz from ITD District 3, and I believe she talked about the environmental assessment. That's correct, for that project and the requirements that had to be met. Is that basically?
I recall, yeah, okay, so Ms. Kuntz, because I got her name wrong, or I misplaced that, so that's why it sticks in my mind. And Mr. Steed, I'm struggling with some language, so it's not, so it's objective, but it's something along the line that, and I'll just throw this out for consideration. That ITD has reviewed reviewed the file. I'm thinking no action to be taken, but I don't want to speak for them. I hesitate to chisel anything in the record that isn't accurate.
I do think it needs a comment in there that ITD spoke to this and took a position in the meeting. Maybe asking her, what did you tell us? And I don't know her name.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so this is Justin Price. So it was Jamie Kuntz, and I could, if someone wanted to write something up, I could send it to her and say, is this what you said? Or I could ask her to summarize what she spoke to and submit it. Either one I'd be happy to do.
I would, Mr. Steed, and I apologize, the gentleman on the Zoom, I think that that's a wise course. I don't think we're in a position to attribute a statement to ITD without them signing off on it. So let's hold, and depending on the timing, if you would, as you proposed, fire off a note to her, and we'll hold these minutes. If it comes back in 5 minutes, we sign off. If it comes back in 30 minutes, we sign off. Or if it doesn't, we hold these until the next meeting. Commissioners?
Okay.
That sounds fine.
Mr. Steed, does that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
So, Mr. Chairman, should we have a motion to table this until we get additional information on it? Is that what we should do with
I
this
think that would
agenda
be an
item?
appropriate course of action.
Okay, then I so move.
And the gentleman that's on the phone, and I did miss his name, and he told me who he
Justin
was.
Price.
Justin? Mr. Price?
Yes. Yep. Yes, that's me.
So there's a motion pending. We'll get a second here in a minute. Mr. McKinney, go ahead and state your motion, please.
To table the approval of the minutes until we obtain further information.
From ITD.
Yes.
Okay? And is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's come back to, let's see, so hold. So, Mr. Lewis, back on your notes, we're at the top of page 5.
Yes.
If we say the current city ordinances, or the city ordinance, instead of referenced, put references, take the D off, put an S.
Mhm.
References only golf carts and not UTV/ATV small s. Then we would skip down to the third line where it says, at the time the city ordinance was proposed.
I think you can just strike in 2013, and it makes sense.
Take out the comma, take out the in 2013, take out the comma.
Yep.
Okay, so that at the time the city ordinance was proposed, there was some conflict with state language, comma, so only golf carts was addressed in the city ordinance.
That works for me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Okay, so pending, we'll just, as Mr. McKinney's motion passed, we'll table the adoption of these minutes until we get an official note back from Ms. Kuntz. Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I, before we moved on, so who's writing up something for Jamie to review and sign off on?
Price.
Oh, Justin, you're gonna, okay, thank you.
Mr. Price is initiating, or does he need something further from us, Mr. Hood? Mr. Price?
I think I'm okay. I'm just trying to get a hold of Jamie now to find out what she said, and so I can submit it.
I don't want to give you homework that you're not agreeable to accept.
It's been a lot of years since I've had some good homework, so I'm okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Price. All right, so the approval of the minutes, we've tabled that. Pending ITD comment. All right. Moving on to, that would be the fourth item, old business, action item. Number 2, Transportation Commission Subcommittees. Ms. Miranda, did you?
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, I got to jump ahead a little bit. Has the memo gone out to all commissioners, or were you going to submit that?
The memo was submitted in the minutes, so it is in the packet.
Okay, all right, I apologize.
And then it is also, excuse me, up on the screen as well.
Okay, so.
So during the last Transportation Committee meeting in August, there was discussion regarding subcommittees. Those discussions have been had in the past. There was some questions regarding whether the bylaws allowed formation of subcommittees. So I did include this section of bylaws. It does say that the commission can choose at the chair's approval and the commission's approval to create those subcommittees. We do need at least 2 commissioners on each subcommittee, one of them acting as the chair, appointed by the commission chair. There cannot be more than, there cannot be more than 4 commissioners to serve on any one committee as to avoid a quorum. You can serve on more than one subcommittee, and other members of the community can serve on subcommittees as well if the commission would like. The intent of this memo is just to give you an outline of the framework. The decisions regarding the actual framework of the subcommittees, their descriptions, their members, their frequency of meetings, is up to the commission to decide. Caleb, can you go to the next page?
Right, so, Ms. Carson, this, even though this memo appears in the packet and is printed, those are soft designations. So if you look at that and see your name within a particular group or a particular subcommittee, you're not locked into that. So you can move if you choose, or volunteer to sit on another, or if we want to do a little horse trading, we can move some members there too.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think, one of the most important details to get down first is the description of each subcommittee, so that we're all in agreement of what you'll be discussing before you volunteer yourself onto any.
No, that's good, and I
Okay.
had some notes to fill in some comments there, Ms. Carson.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lewis?
I do have a question on the description of the top two committees. And it has to do with what I recall from the description of them last meeting, and I might be mistaken, so I'll have to lean on Commissioner Leclerc a little bit, because he was the one who described them last time. But the part about street standards and review, or rather just a review of street standards, I thought that was part of the school zone, like a street standards and school zone subcommittee, and I thought that ordinance review was kind of by itself. But I could be mistaken if I didn't hear that correctly.
Well, let me jump ahead.
Sure.
We're now operating under there's one other practice, if you will, meeting. So I attended last week an agenda review meeting with the mayor, with Ms. Carson and Mr. Hood. So we had quite a discussion about the first subcommittee, calling the Street Standard Subcommittee, and my notes was that's what Mr. Leclerc had initially. But the mayor says, I don't know how you describe it or what's a proper description, but one of the tasks on that committee in common terms is, who wants to help the mayor build roads? That's my notes. Okay? Now, and we all know that the city does not have jurisdiction to build the roads, but, and this is Ballard speak, as I see it, the city has gotten themselves a seat at the table to talk to ACHD or be involved in those conversations, and with the ITD, and so we have the ability to have some conversations. And so when he says help to build the roads, maybe that's a different verb, but help to shape where we put roads in the city. Mm-hmm. But the underlying thrust is on this subcommittee is working working with a voice at the table with the two highway districts, departments, that we, I don't know how else to say, but what he says, and I'm not being facetious, who wants to help the mayor build roads? And so Ms. Carson, with some language, then substituted the language there, review subcommittee, or this committee would evaluate ITD, ACHD capital projects and advocate for the interests of the city. This group would be familiar with street standards and review relevant ordinance throughout the city as needed. There's going to be some overlap, I think.
Okay.
But that's a little more, and you're right, the name of that subcommittee, we're suggesting a revision.
Okay.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steed?
if I may ask a question, Mr. Hood.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Hood, does the city have formal street standards? Or even for use as guidelines and suggestions to ACHD.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Steed, not in so many words. We have different standards in different places for certain elements of a roadway cross-section, but no, we don't have.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So the ability of this subcommittee to directly work on street standards would be hard to do because they're not all in one place in a package, and they're not, if I may, Mr. Hood, they're not by ordinance, correct?
Correct. Many of our standards are not by ordinance.
Well, one way to look at that, Mr. Steed, you'd be writing on a clean slate and making proposals from the subcommittee through this commission to maybe put some formalities or get some formal standards. That's a matter of ordinance.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. We were discussing street standards as if they were right here in a small book or a big book, and had a subcommittee that was supposed to review them. I think that's a little hard. I think what you just said will be more like reality.
Yeah, so...
Mr. Chair, yeah, if I could just follow up a little bit for those of you that may want to volunteer for this group. So Miranda right now is actually gathering those standards from the Ada County Highway District, from ITD, from Public Works, from different various places, and putting it into a hopefully smaller than larger book. But basically, to start, to say, you know, the city doesn't have many standards, but here's where the ISPWC standards are for streets everywhere. Are there any of them we want to either adopt or look at changing or working with and codifying potentially in our standards to make them our standards? So Miranda's working on that exercise right now to pull those all in from the various places they live.
I spoke too soon. Apologize. No, I think your comment's well taken, Mr. Steed.
Thank you. One other thing in conjunction with that, if I may. The way the description of this committee is written, I know it was purposefully to review street standards was purposefully taken out. But if Mr. Hood is going to get them pulled together, get them in one place, it refers to reviewing ordinances, and street standards are not ordinances. So I would suggest that it have something to the effect about reviewing street standards, even if it is subservient to ACHD, the City Council, and everybody else, so that it states that that's one of the things this committee could do.
I see your point. So, Mr. Steed, just to throw out for conversation, after street standards, if you had a prepositional phrase of current highway districts / departments, or some language there, because review relevant ordinance throughout the city. I'm just, you tell me how to modify it, what you would propose.
Yes, sir. If I may, Mr. Chairman, my only point, my main point is that it talks about reviewing relevant ordinances and street standards, whether they are the cities or ACHD or not ordinances. So I'm just trying to say that they should be included as some separate document item that the committee would be looking at.
Mr. LeClaire, want to jump in?
Yeah, maybe we just don't need to say review relevant. Just say, put in, the group would be familiar with street standards throughout the city. But these standards were in all different places. So the idea was, from our committee, was, let's get it all. And then we might want to tweak it. Any city can have a resolution that says this is what we prefer. Look at a
Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
I'm looking at page 4 of our meeting minutes that we just tabled. And we have, the list there. Streets, ordinance, building, application. So it seems like we've got those things right there. You know, as we look at the list that's in the memo for this month, as it's been mentioned before, certainly raised a little bit. So the ordinance and project review, that could potentially be a lot of work.
Yes, and
I like has been mentioned, I'd be supportive of moving standards, if you will, to the school zones. That is all over it. But, so I think. So you can stick with those 3 that we had from our meeting minutes last time, as far as street standards, ordinance review, and application. Those would be the 3 groups. Probably more or less.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Hood.
if I can just corroborate your story a little bit in our meeting last week with the mayor. So you're right, the minutes I think are accurate. When we went through these subcommittees, though, with the mayor, he encouraged us to tweak them slightly. Not that we can't do what you just mentioned, Mr. Lancaster, and move the street standards down with school zone, but as the chair just mentioned, who wants to help me build roads? That's kind of this first group, project review, right? So a group anyways, that can advocate for roadways, intersections, multimodal projects, whatever. So that's why that one, although not reflected in your minutes, you wanted to have something in the title that's, again, projects and someone that can, and maybe that turns into task force that work on a specific project or a mile segment or whatever. And then as we start to kick that around a little bit more, it's good for those folks to have a good handle then on, well, what are we advocating for? What are our standards that we're asking? If we're going to ask ACHD to build this road, shouldn't we know what cross-section we're asking them to build? So just a peek behind a little bit of, I know it varies from the subcommittee that we served on and Mr. Leclerc's report last month, but that's just sort of how it evolved, devolved, depending on how you want to look at it, why you have what you have in front of you. So I think we're okay as long as those elements still show up. I guess what I was, a little bit hesitant of is, again, that project review. Not so much, I think the other pieces are there, but as long as it's clear that that group is really going to be kind of working to advocate, that's a newer piece. So anyways, I just want to point that out. Oh, sorry, I have 2 more quick things, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead.
One, Mr. Price has his hand up, so I think after we're done with this, he probably has an update on where we're at with Jamie Kuntz and her response. The other thing is, and it's I think in the title okay, but just back to the point of street standards and ordinances, we do have non-street standard ordinances that we'll be reviewing. So if you did break them apart, kind of like you said, I would leave ordinance review under one group, and they could look at things like compression brakes, right? That doesn't have anything to do with the street standard. And ATV, UTV. By the way, whoever volunteers for this, your first meeting is going to be about ATV, UTV golf carts. So no, that's coming up later this month or first part of next, as soon as I can get it scheduled. So those are 2 separate things. Street standards and ordinance review would be other things. So just as long as everyone's clear what they're signing up for here when we get to volunteers, those are the differences. Thank you.
I have one. I have a suggestion, and it will consist of about less than 10 words. So if we have in project and ordinance review subcommittee, if we put in front of the word or the phrase street standards, just put with applicable street standards, because we have 2 verbs there, familiar with applicable street standards, and review, 2 separate functions. And then I think it's well taken that in school zone, we chisel in some language there that also say, review applicable street standards. It's going to apply in both subcommittees. And as Mr. Hood has identified, there are going to be different street standards depending on the topic and the focus of the group.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Hood captured my original intent with my comments. I was trying to stand up for Commissioner Claire's position in the subcommittee that I served on, that he wanted street standards looked at. And I didn't feel that the way this is written really included that. Whether it's in first committee, second committee, third committee, no, never mind to me. But I do believe it's different from ordinances, and if the commission wishes to have some subcommittee look at street standards, I think it should say so. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Carson?
should the school zone and, if we change it to school zone and street standards subcommittee, rather than saying this group would be familiar with applicable street standards, should it say something to the effect of this group will develop street standards?
In the school zone.
In the city? Are we talking about the group is developing street standards for the city? Or are we saying they're only developing street standards for the school zone?
Well,
I just want to make sure I understand the intent.
to that also, Commissioners, last week in the meeting, there was also a discussion, does this call for a fourth subcommittee? In the sense that we're trying to identify discrete tasks, but as it comes about, please keep in mind that we want to have subcommittees looking at different subject matters, and we just got to figure out who's going to take up those tasks and where we identify it. And I think we're getting hung up a little bit in the weeds as to where we stick some points, but it's important in the sense that we have some designated responsibilities or areas of interest, or areas of focus, excuse me. So, we want to get, so Mr. Leclerc, are you thinking you've got 3 subcommittees or 4 subcommittees? One or both of them, or maybe all 3 of them, are going to be looking at street standards, I think.
Another evolutionary thing that's happened, I think, in the last couple months, at least last month, Walter and I have been looking at these development applications. We're having some chat, deciding what to say, how much we can say, should we say anything. And so, I'll let Walter think about that too. Maybe that workload isn't nearly what we thought it was going to be for that development application. Maybe they should be working. It'd be far more useful for us to have the city standards in one place. And if we thought development applications where we continue to just on our own watch them, the commissioner may bring up a suggestion. Maybe that's just a better use of that, for have the street standards, get them all in one place, wrestle around. But I'd let Mr. Steve comment on that thought. Now, this is kind of the 11th hour, but we're finding there's a lot of work there, but we don't see many recommendations that are surfacing to the full commission. So I'll let him see if he thinks about that. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I called Mr. Hood after the first 14 development applications that we got in bulk. And my comments were, I think the city, ACHD, all of the reviewing agencies that see those things are doing a great job. And I can't really see anything for the Transportation Commission to get involved in unless there is some particular certain proposal that jumps out at us. I've reviewed every one they've sent to me. I'm on the city clerk's list to get these things. I read them all. and I've yet to be able to find anything where I feel like I ought to bring it to this table. I think Tom's point is correct. I think some of us that have interest and want to should look at them and see if something jumps out. But, and if we would really review them and have to write a report every time they put one of those things out, it is a workload that I don't want.
Okay.
I do think we should look at them. I think we ought to just watch them and let it go at that. And I don't know that it needs to be under a subcommittee to do that.
Okay. So, and I think, Mr. Leclerc and Mr. Steed, that raises, you used the word evolving. As we have some growing pains and 6 months, 12 months of experience under our belt, do we make adjustments to the assignments for these committees? And you raise a point there. Okay, I'll just jump ahead then. What group is going to assist the mayor working on roads, help him build roads? Be that project ordinances, be that the school zone, or be that the plan development application. Suggestion: you got a priority that needs to find a home.
Mr. Chairman?
We serve at his discretion. I'll put a fine point on it. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, you know, the more we've talked about this, I would be okay with leaving it as it is, and then, as you said, if we need to make adjustments, you know, 2 or 3 months into this, and we figure out that one committee doesn't have enough to do and one has too much to do, we can reallocate some responsibility if needed. I mean, to change what a subcommittee does isn't a big deal, is it?
Well, we have a lot of, Mr. McKinney wanted to, I heard a comment and I cut it off. I didn't mean to. Article 3, Section 3, subcommittees, whoever sits in this chair has a lot of discretion of how these come about and what they do.
Outstanding.
But I listen to the scientists. No, so I think this is a fair conversation. So let's draw it back. Are we looking at 3 committees then, commissioners? All right.
Yes.
All right. Are we good with the name, project, and ordinance review subcommittee? Are we good with the school zone subcommittee? Are we good with the development application subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I'm okay with all those 3. I think I'd probably still separate project and ordinance review as 2 separate tasks.
All right.
And then based on the feedback from this side of the room, perhaps we don't even have development application at all.
All right, so...
Mr. Chair? Ms.
Carson?
If I may, the ordinance review, it's sounding like maybe something that each group touches on. It sounds like the capital project may touch more on the operational things such as the UTV, ATV. School zone committee might touch more on ordinances revolving school zones, and then a street standards would touch more on ordinances if we wanted to develop any. So perhaps we put the clause about review relevant ordinances throughout the city as needed into each of the 3. And then we can discuss which group takes which ordinances if they need to be reviewed.
Wise, Mr. Lancaster?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I anticipated this being quick and easy, but it's not.
And you're not asking the question.
Apparently I'm not, yeah. You're doing a great job asking the questions, but I think about what, so having
having been the instigator of this subcommittee idea a long time ago or a couple years ago when we did the school zone subcommittee, I think to why we did that. So we took stuff that comes here regularly and said there's an easier place to do this than sitting in this room. And so schools was a recurring topic, and we decided to take it to a smaller room and then report back to this room. Right? So I think about the tasks or the things that are recurring topics on our agenda. Right? So we have project prioritization. Right? We've got planning. So that's one. We've got, we'll call it speed limit, cut through traffic. Those are recurring, right? School is recurring. And then we've got kind of presentations, right? Whether they're shared vehicles or transit or whatever, right? We have lots of presentations. And so, I think we better make it, if we take the approach that I took with the schools of what are the recurring themes that we have here, and let's break them into a smaller group where we can have more informal conversations and then bring it back. So I think we better make our subcommittees match our recurring topics. One that we've done recently is kind of gotten involved with directing what projects look like, right? We've done that a couple times, and that's what I understand we're talking about with project review. So, maybe that's a fifth one that we do now. But I think we better make, our committees match those recurring topics, I guess. So I would see ordinance, to Miranda's comment of, I don't know, I see ordinance and I see these lawyers over here getting together and writing ordinances, right? So I do see that as one committee rather than being split, I don't know, that's how I'm seeing it, So I really like this idea, Mr. Chairman, of 3 committees with 3 commissioners on each subcommittee. The longer we talk about this and the more I look at it, I'm not quite sure we've got the tasks split up yet, but I like the way the commission is split up into 3 each, and so, maybe this still needs a little bit more time to stew. I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
I think Miranda's got a good point, though, because reviewing ordinance, if you just, how boring would it be just to sit and look at ordinances that had every facet of projects and streets and stuff, where if you look at ordinances that pertain specifically to what you're looking at, be it a school zone or something where you can focus with a thought over the overarching, what you're trying to accomplish in a school zone, will mean a lot more than looking at just ordinances throughout. The other ordinance we're looking at is golf carts and UTVs. Now, if the school zone committee is working on ordinances and reviewing things like that for school zones, probably doesn't want to take aside notes and look at golf carts. Just a thought.
Mr. Chair, if I may, also with that, because you can have no more than 4 commissioners, if you did want to invite one of the more legal-minded commissioners to one of those meetings, I don't think that there would be an issue with it. If there's only 3 commission members already on that subcommittee, you could invite that 4th without having a quorum.
Mr. Chairman, let's kind of build on what Commissioner Lancaster and Commissioner Hopkins are saying. It doesn't seem like ordinance review happens very often. The ATV, UTV golf cart thing came up back in 2013 was the last time we talked about it. So it's a pretty infrequent event. So if that top committee were standards, and then the school zone subcommittee and the development application, even though development application doesn't take a lot of time, perhaps there's a lot of them that come through. And then you can, when an ordinance comes up, you can assign it to whatever of our other committees it most applies to, but it is pretty infrequent, I think.
Okay. So let's let's kind of bring this to a head. We moving forward, or we want time to think about it? Mr. Leclerc, what do you have?
Well, Mr. Lewis, a certain ordinance may be infrequent, but infrequent. 18 months out of this year, we've done the air brake ordinance, we've done.
It's true.
Talked about in depth the speed limit ordinance.
True.
Probably almost a dozen ordinances that this commission has dealt with. And, we made recommendations to the council that were not intentional. So the idea is to have more concrete involvement. Ordinances enough to interest of the public, like at the alleyway, in downtown area, and when there's, you know, and there's ordinances like that air brake one, I know we can go back to that, but it's so there's two sides to that too. New stuff and reviewing and monitoring and improving the old. So I think there's plenty of monthly work.
That's true. I'd forgotten.
Also, Mr. Lewis, maybe just get started with this. We've got this here, and it's pretty good. I think you could break this out. If we put in language on these ordinances on all of the committees, that's okay, because they all might run into city ordinances that affect our decisions or affect projects that we want to do. So that's not a bad suggestion. I think basically the structure is okay. I think it's an improvement, and we'll see a lot more of our involvement in issues today and be more effective commission. If we think some of these functions need to be shuffled in a few months, I think we'll find back to where let's get it started. It's okay how the chairman is reorganized this week.
Mr. Chairman.
Steve?
Thank you, sir. Let me try this, and we'll see what happens. I would suggest changing the first subcommittee presented to us to the Project Review Subcommittee, et cetera, and the next sentence, this group would review street standards and relevant ordinances throughout the city as needed. I would add review street standards and ordinances as needed to the school zone subcommittee, and you could add it to the third subcommittee as well, as Ms. Carson suggested. And then we are doing what Mr. LeClaire and I wanted, which was to get the ability to review street standards. Whether we want to make any recommendations or not, we still can review them. The ordinances are included because we do deal with them all the time. And no one is being cut out of being able to look at street standards in their subcommittee if that's what they wish to do.
All right. We've been at this about 45 minutes. So let's see if this works then. Heavy emphasis on it works. First committee, Project Review Subcommittee would evaluate ITD and ACHD capital projects and advocate for the interests of the city. This group would review street standards and relevant ordinances throughout the city as needed. Okay?
Mr. Chair, this is Tony at Compass.
Yes?
Could I suggest that you have ex officio members of Compass and VRT on that committee as well?
Can we have non-commissioners on that committee? Yes.
I would suggest that VRT and Compass serve as ex officio members.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we discussed that, Ms. Tisdale, at the agenda meeting, that the bylaw does not restrict, let's start over. we can have non-commissioner members upon invitation or, application. So, the point well taken, so I'm going to include on the project subcommittee, BRT, and Compass. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Now, then at the school zone subcommittee, just add another bullet point, review street standards. And then street standards.
And ordinances or just street standards?
Okay,
And, Mr. Chairman, and ordinances.
okay. All right, now, I said that a little fine now. I don't, tell me if it doesn't.
Works.
Okay. So, Mr. Lane?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You good?
I think, well, if you want me to speak freely, Mr. Chairman, I think we're quickly speeding towards three subcommittees that all look the same.
Well, let's just make a footnote here that we're in 6.2
Okay.
and report back and see how it functions. And now, I just want to get got a skeleton. We need to put a little flesh on it. But I think we've got the first layer or two. So let's work with those three groups if we will. Now, appointments, suggested appointments on the first committee. I didn't write this. Subcommittee Chair Ballard, Commissioner McKinney, Tracy Hopkins. Somebody else want to jump on, jump in, jump off, replace?
I'm good with it.
Okay. School Zone Subcommittee, Ryan Lancaster, Stephen Lewis, and we have ex officio, Meridian Police Department. Okay. Third committee, Development Application, Blair, Chair, Mr. Smith, Walter Steve. Walter, do you want to spread yourself?
No, sir.
No, sir? Okay.
Unless that was more than a question.
That was a suggestion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McKinney.
just going back to the first, subcommittee, as we mentioned, the members, we might also add in the bullet point, ex officio members from VRT and Compass.
Yes.
As we talked about just a minute ago.
Yes, I have that in my notes. Thank you. Okay. No, Mr. Steve, in the short time I'm saying, there's some experience there, past experience, and that's not to exclude other members here, but I see that's one of your strengths.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I signed that in pencil, not in pen. So.
That's very wise, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So then, let's see, Mr. Claire, needed to get this noticed, which we did. So we cleared that hurdle. And so we then have, this is not by fiat, but it's by appointment or establishment. But, again, I give it to work with some very talented people here. Right on this plus, I appreciate it. So I drafted this forward with that. Okay. Anything else to discuss on transportation?
Mr. Chair. I think it would be, good, Mr. Chair, just for a motion, and it can even just say, as just discussed, you know, something like that, if we'd have a motion and maybe take a vote on the outline you just provided and the members that you just provided.
Okay. Somebody want to make that? Mr. Leclerc?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, very good. I wasn't necessarily counting the minutes, but I think that takes a lot of conversation to get us organized, and moving forward. Next item, transportation projects update.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so I spoke with Jamie Kuntz, and she didn't recall specifically what the question was. She knew that there was dialogue about the noise walls, but she didn't know what her answer was because she didn't specifically remember what the question was. Does anyone recall what the question was?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steed?
My memory is the chairman invited ITD company with no specific question.
Well, my comment was I wasn't going to speak for the department because I'm not the representative. And my recollection is that the ITD had completed its work, and I would probably leave the comment at that. The conversation was that they would reconsider or reopen it, and I think it came back. They completed their work.
Well, if I might.
Yes, sir.
I just am trying to get in the minutes the fact that ITD representative, and my memory is an invitation of the chair, came forward and spoke to their position on that particular section of sound barrier / wall / whatever you want to call it, and it was pretty definitive. And that was, at that point, that was when I asked Mr. Hood for the city's side of it. And that's why I went to Mr. Hood, was because I felt ITD had said, not us. And I would feel that the minutes should reflect something to that effect.
Yeah, and when I spoke to Jamie now, I asked her how it went, and she recalled being asked to go up and speak at the podium. But her recollection was that it was to answer a question, but at this point, she didn't remember specifically what that question was, just that there was discussion about the barrier. So that's all I have to
And
report.
Mr. Chair, I can help with some of that. So again, a lot of the question came about the environmental impact assessment and it being done prior to Bainbridge subdivision. So when the environmental assessment was done, this was farm ground and there weren't homes there, and technically homes weren't planned there. They hadn't come through the annexation process. So when ITD looked at where the state should put in a sound wall, this wasn't considered because there weren't any homes adjacent, either existing or even planned at that point. So that's, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but that's essentially it. It's not ITD's role or responsibility because the environmental document did not say a sound wall was necessary in that location because there weren't any homes in that location, if that makes sense. So I don't know how to really craft that, but essentially, something to the effect that she addressed, ITD's roles and responsibilities regarding the sound wall, and addressed the commission's question about ITD's role or responsibility in that. But that's the reality of it. Is it's sort of a timing thing. If they would have done the environmental today, they would have to mitigate some of the noise, but there wasn't any mitigation required because those homes weren't there when they did the study, essentially.
Right, and I hesitate to attribute any comments. One, it's not our job. We're not sitting in an adjudicative or passing any kind of assessment. My recollection is similar with Mr. Hood's, that she addressed the roles and responsibilities.
So, Mr. Chair, can you try this language on, and maybe and again, I'm not trying to attribute any comments, but I do think it's at least worth mentioning that she's here. We actually have it in there that she attended, but not under this topic, so it makes some sense to put that into context. I just wrote in, Jamie Kuntz with ITD attended and addressed questions regarding ITD's roles and responsibility regarding the sound wall. Doesn't say what she said about it, doesn't say that they take responsibility for it or don't, just that she stood for a question or two and answered them. It's fairly generic, and I wish it could have been more specific, but it at least notes that she was here, present, and addressed the commission.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Given the gaps in the record from that meeting, I think this proposed entry in the minutes is about the best that we can do. So I would propose that we accept this.
Proposed, accept Mr. Hood's comment that Ms. Kuntz addressed questions posed.
Right. They insert the language in the minutes, just as Mr. Hood stated, as probably the best record that we can come up with at this point of what should be in the minutes in that particular point.
And have the emphasis on objective. Or objective in the, excuse me, I've muddled it up. we don't speak for the department, so as you said, she answered the questions.
Right. She addressed the issue. That's, I think, the most we can put in the minutes at this point.
You want to craft language, or?
I propose that we adopt the language that Mr. Hood has suggested just a few moments ago.
Okay. Mr. Steed, you had your hand up.
I was not trying to put IT in a position that they hadn't put themselves in. So I think you're correct. If we don't have a good audio record of it or a video of it, and we don't know exactly what happened, then what Mr. Hood has proposed is as good as we're going to get. And was that a motion? If it was, I'll make a second so we can get the minutes approved.
Well, I got a motion and a second before us. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Price. Joe.
You're welcome.
Kuntz. Dress.
Mr. Chair, because we did have, I think, 4 changes to the minutes, would you like me to correct those in print form and have you sign them, and we can do that here later this week rather than you having to notate them? We'll get you a clean copy.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, that's acceptable. Okay. Transportation projects update.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to cover this one. Miranda did put the memo together for this, but there's a few of the projects that I wanted to talk to you about. It does begin on page 10 in your packet for today. I'll also have it on the roll as I talk. The first one that I really wanted, again, as typical, everything we do is in bold. First, bring to your attention 11, and that has to do with Eagle Road and Amp Road roundabout. Here's, I want to provide you a little bit of an update. I didn't think some of the update is here in the memo. Albert Plaza project moving forward. Big rate has been. They are asking extension. The other part of that is on ACHD side, and that project is up. I've talked with council 2 times in the past month about 2 different projects, but it's going out. They were designed together. They have asked for a joint meeting. Project being about and the blame. even years. So there's enough of council that they, how it's going to play out, being out to bid currently. That is something they took up, as well as those crosswalks. There with council that and consider redesigning. Anyway, just a quick update on that. I don't know how it's all going to play out, but there's discussions about the design of that project that are happening. Elected officials. Fairview Locust Road. One where I Pedestrian Refuge Island. When the ACC project manager provided a project status update, they were pretty concerned about the buffered bike lane being proposed there. So basically, the buffered bike lane is paint, 2 feet of paint, basically, bike lane, same level of traffic. You got some concerns as well through the public involvement process, that not being bike. Basically, long story short, they sent them back to the drawing board to figure out a different design to make bicycle, particularly segment, but eventually corridor. Have a meeting coming up. We're all going to sit down back to the drawing board. Project. Anyways, a couple steps back or a couple steps forward, I guess, depends on how you look at it. But the timeline's delayed. More to come on that. Again, I've got a project team meeting. So I'll share some more. But yeah, it was your commission. And then the last one I want to highlight. And that's the North Meridian neighborhood. This is actually, President Bautista addressed the commission. The draft plan is out there, and I don't think, in the interest of time, I'm not going to run through all the projects with you, but I would encourage you to go to ACC's website and you just type in North Meridian, it'll pop up this time. You can see the project, the priority project, name of the project, maps as well. So here's your bicycle project, all labeled. But high, medium, and low, basically. Project. So there's bicycles, sidewalk segments are identified. There's crossing. Crossing. If you want to review that, that's good. They will be presenting this information. I actually just saw, I think, there today, workers next door, so they're advertising right now. They're on. Anyways, just in the interest of I'm planning on running through all of this with you guys. Have looked at this, have reviewed it, have access as well. Actually relied fairly heavily on our community programs projects when looking at this. So your annual prioritization rate, did have some of the projects that were low or medium on the priority list. And we've identified this segment as being higher in our community sidewalk. Bump this up near the new high school. Anyways, totally just bring that to you. Talk about shared vehicles, which is also on the agenda here in a little bit. With that, Mr. Chair, those are the
Questions for Mr. Hood, Commissioners?
Mr. Chair, the second item on page 11, the 10 Mile Road, Macmillan, Chinden, is fully open, no barrels, no candlesticks, except down at the south end of that section to channel people correctly into the two-lane traffic that's on Chinden to Eustig. I don't know if anything needs to be done other than just inform the commission that where that one says to be complete in the fall of 2020, it appears to be to me. I live over there.
Appreciate that. They're ahead of schedule. Well, next week is the fall. 23rd, I believe. Okay. Other question, comments, follow up with Mr. Hood's report? Okay. Let us take up new business. Meridian Police Department update. Sergeant. Thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon. I have a couple updates for you. I mentioned last month our seatbelt emphasis we were partnering with Iowa Transportation Department on. We finished that up. Contacted about 640 people during that time frame, and we kept our percentile or percentage of seatbelt compliance right around the 90% mark. That way for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been involved in traffic stuff, so the last 5-6 years. And a couple of things in your package, you'll see there's an email from a gentleman talking about Northwest 8th Street during time. He's requesting action reference speed bumps there. We do have pretty recent speed study data that comes out of Northwest 8th. We use that data to guide our enforcement efforts. The average speed travel on Northwest 8th in that area is 23 miles an hour. The 95th percentile speed is 31 miles an hour. We do know that people speed there occasionally. It does not meet traffic calming criteria for speed, but it does for volume. Also right next to the school. So there's, I'm not sure there's a lot that can be done about that other than to continue our enforcement efforts to catch the occasional speeder through there, which there are. I was out there last Wednesday and Thursday and got to be myself. And then also, a gentleman in the packet talks about trying to contact someone in the city multiple times. Chase was his name. I did call him, and multiple time things is kind of misleading. But we did have contact for the first time. He was talking about a road called Twin Tall, which is off of German in this case. And we have been out there to address his concerns before. It is a residential area. There are some speeders that go through there, and some stop sign enforcement that we've been participating in. And our radar trailer has been out there for the last 8 days. I think it's going to move tomorrow. So we'll use the data that we collect off of it to guide our next steps. Again, it's one of those streets that speed limit is 25. So if you're going 28, it looks like you're going 40. It's a narrow street. The cars and people around. We'll see where the data takes us there. That's all I have.
Questions for Sergeant Frazier, Commissioners? Mr. Steed?
A question for the sergeant. Has someone or yourself or others communicated with Mr. Rogers about your speed study on 8 so that he's got a conclusion?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't hear back from him. I know that John Lawson with ACHD also had contact with him. I think that's in the packet also. He got contacted by me, our chief, the city, kind of addressed all of his questions. And my knowledge, none of us have heard back on what he said.
Thank you.
Very good. Other comments, follows up for Sergeant Frazier? Good.
So, Mr. Chair, I was planning on doing this kind of, when we got to the staff communication, but it seems appropriate. So a lot of times, Sergeant Fraser just pointed out, a lot of things can be handled just kind of at the staff level, and I don't want this to fly in the face of what you guys have, been beating into me and us and police. I appreciate it. You're here for a reason, and we want to vet things through you and get your expertise on this. Some of these things, though, seem sort of administrative in nature, but I wanted to check in on these topics, and that's what makes while they're here. Someone requests a stop sign, you want that to come before the commission. Someone requests a speed hump. So I'm still trying to figure out those things, I guess, is my question. Like, we're not trying to bypass the commission, but some of these things we can try somewhat bring to resolution to. And I guess I'll call your attention to page 19. And that's kind of my typical response. Start with ACH, see what they say. If you don't like that, you still want to press the issue. And you don't like them, they're warned, you don't like their whatever, come to us, and we can talk that through. Next to special consideration. Talk to the ACG says, you don't have to call this meeting, but there's something else that they should be considering. We can maybe do that. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit there, but trying to understand again, if you want to see everything that's transportation related or not. And I guess part of my reason for bringing that up or feeling comfortable, someone requests a stop sign, now I got to make them wait 3 weeks to come before you when I could just, at the end of the day, you're either going to say, hey, yeah, talk to HHC, see if there's a warrant for a stop sign. So it's like, I can get that process going, all these things. I get it, there's a line there. Bypass the commission. Some seem like they can, again, traffic or myself, help me understand where that line is a little bit better. I would appreciate it. If I crossed one.
Mr. Lancaster. Mr. Chairman, I guess just in response to what Caleb asked, I think all of these things that Sergeant Fraser just talked about or that you mentioned, I think they're all, you acted fine appropriately. There are things that we've hashed out here, and, I think if they did come to us, we'd say the exact same thing as what you did. So I think all that's fine. And, thanks for asking.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Steed.
In an attempt to formulate an answer to Mr. Hood's question, I don't know that we need to spend time hearing and listening to every one of these. With that being said, I would think that those that Mr. Hood or the sergeant feel are reportable to us, even if they're resolved, should be placed on our agenda by them, or those things where they have dealt with a person that has an issue and they don't get acceptance, that person be advised that there is a transportation commission, and we could consider putting this before them like they did the fence up on Chinden, and we could then get into it. So I guess what I'm saying is that they report to us things they think are pertinent to us and bring to us, or suggest that the applicant bring to us things that they can't seem to satisfy.
Very good. Any follow-up there on Mr. Steed? I'll weigh in on that, Mr. Steed. Yes, Sergeant.
I can say that the communication from the police department to the gentleman on Northwest from our chief, explain kind of the more acute aspects of this compliance with speeding, things we can do right now, my office and my tools, things I'm not capable of doing, and full officers notified the Transportation Commission meets monthly process for that, and that he still wants to pursue this after talking to ACG, going down some of those roads. That your ears are open, he knows who you are, and where you
Very good. I was gonna say, you and Mr. Steed were a fly on the wall, or flies on the wall, in the agenda meeting the other day, because that's kind of where I came out on, and you probably expressed it better, and that is, we're a forum to hear matters, and we welcome people to come before, but these are day-to-day issues that I'm not even gonna say it. You handle it because that's your job. We're not asking to interfere with that, or any other commission, but the point, commissioners, we asked for a little more room on our plate, and let's not be surprised when we get suggestions from police department or whom else that says someone's going to come and have a chat with you. And it seems almost kind of circular, because we're going to review the things that they can do with your agencies to resolve it. But on that occasion, that we've come up with an idea that says, well, maybe there is something else. So I guess I'd end it by just saying, please continue to say we're open for business if they want to come and have a conversation with us. Thank you, Mr. Steed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sergeant.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Okay. Shall we release him? Okay. Thanks, Sergeant. All right. Shared vehicles, item 5. Mr. Hood, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 17 in your packet is a memo on shared vehicles. I might just jump to the end of that memo. Finn, who is a current provider of shared, they're providing that service in Boise right now, has reached out to me, and I jumped on a phone call with Bauschauer, who is the DBA president downtown. He's going to be back talking about alleyways next month. So we invited Finn to come and address it. So all that to say, you may not want to take action on this right now. You certainly could if you want. But I need to basically get their request / proposal for the council. Probably wait a little bit longer. Moving into the winter time, our ordinances talk about, basically January 1st, 31st for a contract for any shared vehicle providers. Time to get the RFP out there, review it, score it, put under contractors. We're to move forward with this. But essentially, that's the question. Where we left this last year, as a city decided at the recommendation of the scoring committee who looks at shared vehicles, timing just wasn't right to pursue a shared vehicle vendor. And they respectfully declined the offer. Follow-up to that was direction basically to do the MDBA. Say, you come back to us, MDBA, as when you think the timing is right. So again, this wasn't brought up by the MDBA, but we think Meridian. I will point out that Finn not necessarily contract going through our current process is set up, but they said, hey, can we basically test your market? And I talked to Emily Kane, Howard set up for this process, RFP, and if you want to do business, our provider. So, not that we can't change that, but that's basically how we're set up for business type of thing. We don't allow anyone to do free. There's a process. Provide these credentials and a proposal how you're going to operate a contract. So, anyways, they're interested in that. I think again they want to sort of test the waters a little bit before entering into a year-long. But can I direction on that? How we envisioned it back out. The MDBA be honest, another month delay may allow the MDBA to readdress the question, that back to you on, yeah, we think it's greater. Lofts still aren't ready, still don't have, still under construction here downtown with tops. Or we are, but at least they would have some market. Anyway, a little bit of background. That's fair. Make more of an informed decision, if you will. Or maybe you like their proposal about doing a pilot.
Mr. Chairman.
Steve?
A question, Mr. Hood. The fact that you can't just allow somebody to do a pilot project for no charge because you'd like to know the answer to their project as well as they would, could you not put out an RFP for a pilot project?
Sure.
And if you got 2, 4, 6, 8 responses, or if you got one response, you could then be in a position to contract for a pilot project if staff agrees or the commission agrees that pilot project's a good way to start getting into this thing.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Steed, I think there is some leeway, certainly in the RFP. We have some things that are in ordinance, but that's not one of them. It's not that strict. What we did talk about a little bit this last year even, when at the end of the day council decided not to, is we do have an administrative fee associated with that. And maybe lessening that fee, which could essentially make it a pilot project. I mean, if we don't charge $12,500 or $25,000 of an administrative fee, there basically isn't any overhead. There is still. You got to hire folks to charge their vehicles and let them out. But as far as the city goes, they don't have any, there's no cost associated with that. There are costs, but they're more of the soft variety costs, right? I mean, we're on staff and we'll deal with this. That's how we got the administrative fees. There is some effort from staff to track this and report numbers and deal with concerns from the public and riders and those types of things. But to answer your question, more succinctly, yes, I think that's ingrained if we did an RFP. Left some of those provisions from the last 2 templates. You can basically
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about this topic a lot in the past few years, and I'm comfortable with Caleb sharing a message of general support. In the past, our commission has generally been supportive of this shared vehicle idea. We've had some turnover since then, but I remain supportive of the idea in general, leaving details up to city administration as far as contracting and all of that. I don't think that's either our place, nor do I have personal interest in getting into all that stuff. But if we want to keep it as simple as to keep Caleb on schedule, I would be comfortable with him going forward and saying that he has support from at least Commissioner Lancaster for the city moving forward on shared vehicles in whatever way that looks like.
Okay. Other comment, or I can address that. If I hear it right, the question for us today is, do we hear them in an October meeting or say no, present your question to City Council?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that I in particular need another presentation from a scooter provider, right? I mean, we kind of get it by now. I don't need to hear that. If we wanna do that, that's fine. I don't think we necessarily need to wait for that to happen, you know, if there's calendar, or if there's timeframes that need to be met before that. You know, again, I'm generally supportive of the idea.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lewis?
Like Commissioner Lancaster, I'm in support of the general concept of scooter companies operating in Meridian also. If I carry it one step further, I think we know that what, at least in my observation, what killed the scooters in Meridian was that the franchise fee was too big for the revenue that they were able to generate in Meridian. So, if this does come to a motion, I would think we need to add something. We would encourage city staff or council to find a way to reduce that to make it profitable for the scooter companies to operate.
Mr. Hood?
Mr. Chair, I think that is largely the question before you, that Spin's gonna want your support or not. The council or know that, they're obviously gonna want your support for that. That's the question before you, and again, this is one where I wasn't comfortable bypassing. Did go to the commission. I get it, you don't dollars necessarily, but model.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Atkins?
another problem I remember is we don't have buses. A lot of times the scooters are used to extend a bus ride. So the complaint I remember from the scooter companies is we don't have very many destinations. They don't want them at the village, they don't want them here or there, and we don't have buses to extend those bus rides out. So there's going to be more problems than just the money. That's why the pilot program seems like a good way to get our feet wet and not burn anybody.
I guess, Mr. Chair, if I can, just one more, to be a little devil's advocate, but really what's changed, right? We had a vendor, and, well, let's jump back. We had somebody do a demonstration, and we had a vendor, and that vendor said, kind of to your point, we can't make money here. And really, what's changed in the last 18 months? I mean, and really, should that be the city's concern, whether a private company makes money or not? But at the same time, go in eyes wide open, guys. Like, hey, we've had two other companies say this, your market's not ready yet. What pilot do we need? I'll tell you, before you start the pilot, you're not going to be very successful. I want to encourage this too, but I just don't know what's changed, and that's why I bring it back to, it was up to the MDBA to come back to the city when they thought it was ripe, whatever that means. We think somebody can be profitable doing this, or we think there's a ingrained market here downtown, or whatever that is. But I don't know, there's a lot's changed. We don't have buses that are down there.
So, Mr. Hood, let me go back and review where we're at. Last paragraph on page 17 starts, note that SPIN has been invited to the October Transportation Commission meeting to address the commission on their pilot proposal. Yeah, so is there an invitation for them to come next month?
So, yes, Mr. Chair, and I can resend that. That goes back again to August before we've gotten the whole agenda set now. And some of that, again, was opportunistic because Lindsay was already going to be here to talk about alleyways. We had the MDBA president already on the agenda, and so on the phone we said, hey, how about October? Lindsay's already going to be here in the House, so she can talk about two topics. So they have been invited. I can resend that if you like, if that's the will of the commission, and say, hey, just jump to the council, or whatever you want to do. But yes, they have been invited.
Okay. So, commissioners, again, within our parameters, we say we are a venue to listen to people. I don't want to prejudice. I think I know where I'm headed towards this. But the question before us, do we keep the invitation just to explore information without making a decision one way or the other. Mr. Steed?
A question for Mr. Hood, if I may. Is there any cost to the city, and I think you may have indicated there might be, to letting someone do a pilot program, even if you need to go through an RFP to get them selected?
Again, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Steve, any real costs are really soft costs. So there is time involved. We may publish that RFP in a couple of publications, like the paper that require a small, administrative fee, but for the most part, there are no hard costs. We don't have to pay another vendor. It's, again, staff dealing with issues as they come up over the year, basically. A business where a store, street, and stuff. No true hard cost, no out of pocket.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. That being said, I would be in favor of the pilot project if a company thinks they want to do it. It appears that the shared vehicle thing is something to do with a provider's desire to do it. And if a pilot project could turn spin into saying, we'll take it on under these conditions, I think that would be fine. I don't have the history y'all do on this from last year, of course, but I don't particularly know that I need to hear a presentation next month on it.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
So I'm not opposed to hearing them either, but nothing can happen until the council changes the ordinance.
okay. All right.
Excuse me, sir.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure that's true. An RFP, even if it's for a no-cost function, should fit under the city's ordinances for having the RFP to have people do things for it. That was my original question to Mr. Hood. If you're going to RFP for somebody to build a block of street, then they bring it in, you look at it, you decide whether or not you want to accept it. Why not RFP for somebody to do a pilot project? No, and state in it that the city will not participate in the hard costs, and see what happens. See if Spin answers, see if Spin, Acme, and pick another one answer, or just Spin.
Okay. Is there a motion to be made? The question is, and the invitation has been extended to them. The question to us today is, do we hear them out, or hear whatever they want to say, and there's no commitment on anybody's part? Let's wait for an answer.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins.
I propose we hold this till next month, table this until next month, and let those stakeholders come in and at least tell us what their proposal is.
So the motion is to reaffirm the invitation to hear whatever presentation they want to make. I'm putting words in your mouth, sir.
That's what I said.
All right.
Second.
Okay. The motion is to allow the presentation to go forward. No commitments. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Soft tap. All right. So we're shared vehicle staff communications. Mr. Hood. We covered. What haven't we covered, sir? We've got Mr. Rogers on 18. Mr. Rogers on 18. We kind of handled that with Sergeant Frazier here. We have another one, do we not?
So, Mr. Chair, if you want to talk about anything in staff communications, that's up to you. There is a fairly long update, if you will, on the noise debate wall that we heard about last time. So, no resolution to that yet, but you see kind of where we're at in that process. So, that subdivision signed off yet, so the ball's kind of in the developer's court to bring the landscaping fencing up to that standard, so we haven't signed off on it yet, so, there's quite a couple of things. And then, kind of, on 20, is, that section of 2026 delayed associated with the Linder Village project. So at Linder, so that phase, they're in two phases there. Start ITD. Their first phase just starts on the west side of the road on 2026 Meridian Road. So that's back on. So I haven't seen the updates to this, but just letting you know, it was delayed for a while. It's back on the books. Scheduling and all traffic control and stuff through the winter. So those are the updates. Any of those? That's good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question for Caleb. So what was the error on the CO that?
Yeah, so a little bit, so we have I can't even call it new anymore because we've been using it long enough, I can't, but we keep adding tools and stop gaps to it, but it's called a SELA, it's our permitting process. Well, a box wasn't getting checked on there to withhold certificate boxes. Typically, on a residential subdivision, all the required fencing, landscaping, so we're not even talking life safety. Life safety is something we are trying to do. But everything should be done before people. Mr. Walker is living in a subdivision, never been signed off. Fencing is, we haven't done a final inspection on it. We typically don't want people living in subdivisions. These aren't in, you don't have your tot lot done, you don't have your grass put in. So typically, that's what we require. Now, weather, we can work, lay the sod down, okay. But anyways, that's what this is. An error on our part. First, we allowed people to live in that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Mr. Sneed?
So, Mr. Hood, help me get understanding on this. You allowed people to move in. Are you now in a position to say that the development, even though people have moved into it, is not complete, and the developer is responsible for completing it, and more specifically, responsible to do something different with the wall on Chinden that started all this?
So yes, and maybe. Some of the issue with this, and this again goes to timing, is when we approved their plans, that roadway was not under construction. So the plans that we approved showed different materials and setbacks and those types of things. They come in and some roadway changes. So we were looking at plans that are 2 years old that didn't show a widened Chinden. So the plans we're looking at, so this is how it's going to be interesting. I think the developer is going to step up their game. Basically, updated plans to still comply with code because we haven't signed off on it yet. That makes that sound wall berm barrier effective at noise mitigation. Where we're looking at get some verification. They even need to hire sound engineers. What we've as built does what is required for noise mitigation, or we've included some additional materials or double fencing or something that does mitigate the noise. So that's why the ball's in their court. We haven't signed off. We've got approved plans. What's out there though right now does not match the plans that we've approved.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, another item in the email chain, at the bottom of page 19, there is an email from a Mr. Crinage, I guess, that I can't find an answer to it or any resolution of it. He talks about, no one's gotten back to me, this is September 1, he wrote it. No one's gotten back to me. I can't tell from this where he's talking about. He talks about his neighborhood, but I don't know where that is. Mr. Hood, can you elaborate?
This is actually one that the sergeant provided a pretty brief update, but he went boom, boom, boom with some of his updates. So, yeah, this is one where I think he kind of said it was a little misleading about multiple, phone calls and trying to contact folks. So he has talked to them. They are doing patrols. So this is really about enforcement. And we trailer this out there. So he has followed up with this gentleman. He is patrolling their neighborhood currently. With patrol, with the speed trailers, they're looking into this one, so yes, he has contacted it. In the loop on something. Sorry, I didn't some of that, the rest of that. That one, it had some context.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, anything else for Mr. Leclerc?
What I'd like to propose is that our, city meeting is 2:30 p.m. on October 12th. And, I don't know if we meet in this room or the next door, maybe in the room in Caleb's area. That seems like a possible way to just, to get meetings rolling. They all have to have an hour to work on business, and then that business could be presented in reports, both commissions, same day. So, that's a thought for me, Sarah, or, maybe we should discuss that, forward.
Good point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so I like that idea, Commissioner Leclerc. It's not lost on me that the suggested frequency is quarterly, which would mean if each one subcommittee met every month, then they'd rotate quarterly, right? So, I'd propose that idea. So, one of them meet next month, one meet in November, one in December, from there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Ryan.
and I'm not going to make the October 5th meeting.
Well, it's going to be on October 14th.
Is it? No.
12th, excuse me.
I might be able to do that. Might be on crutches, but.
All right. So following up on Mr. Lancaster's, so Mr. Leclerc, the Development Application Subcommittee would meet in October. The October meeting?
Yes.
Okay. School Zone Subcommittee?
Yeah, the 5th is the first Monday.
Well, we got a little issue to discuss there on the 5th.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the School Zone Subcommittee could meet on the 5th if they wanted. They just couldn't meet in this room. And they wouldn't be meeting directly prior to the Transportation Commission.
All right, so, all I'm looking at is for the, School Zone Subcommittee. What are your thoughts?
Tell us when you want us to meet, we'll be happy to. Sure, that sounds fine.
Project Review Subcommittee, we have Ballard, McKinney, Hopkins. December?
Sure.
Okay. And the concept is at 2:30 prior to the Transportation Commission meeting.
Mr. Chairman, just one question.
Mr. Lewis?
So what happens if the School Zone Committee doesn't have anything to talk about?
No, you pass.
Okay, that's clear.
Okay. So, maybe this sounds a little disjointed. We're bumping up against 5:30. Okay, so we have downtown alleys in October, Lindsay Bowser coming back. We can always have Arbor's Transit back at a time. We got signs and city ordinances. Well, that sounds like something for the December meeting of the subcommittee for us. And Main King Crosswalk. Let us take up the conversation on October 12th being the next meeting. There was a conflict, and so I suggested at the agenda meeting that we move to the 12th. We're already back a week as it is. The 12th seems like a natural to resolve a conflict about where we can meet, if I recall right, Mr. Hood?
Correct.
That was the issue there, and so I said, well, 12th is as good as any. I may have to talk to my wife about that being the day after our anniversary, but that's my issue. I also have some other calendar events, but that personal note aside.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to put a finer point on that real quick. This room is under construction on the 5th for what I talked about with the audio visual. So the clerk said, hey, you can have this room if you kick it out a week, or we can try to fit something in AB, but it's going to be even more just dysfunctional. That's not the right word. It's going to be disjunct. Yeah, less dysfunctional. Yes, no. It's going to be tougher with Zoom, and we don't have good audio. Even worse in other rooms. So we said, let's just see if the commission's willing to push it a week, so we can be back in our normal spots and not have to figure out how to make this work in another.
Just to confirm, Mr. Chairman, the city hall is open on Columbus Day?
Yes.
Okay.
Recognize that may be a holiday for others. City hall is open.
For other people. Yeah.
You're volunteers.
For many of our ex officio agencies, that may be a holiday too.
Well, it is a state holiday, and there was something in parentheses. The city hall is open, so unless you want to take the pencil away, I put us down for the 12th. I'm good. Anything else for the good of the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just one comment before we conclude, just for the information of the members of the commission. I have thrown my hat into the ring to run for ACHD Commission this fall. So I am running for ACHD Commission for District 5.
Best wishes.
Thank you.
Okay. I knew about that, but I was not going to release that information until you announced it. All right. We're just a tick after 5:30. Unless there's objection, we stand adjourned until the 12th of October at 3:30. Very good. Thank you.
Running is fun. I always thought it was fun. I hated door knocking, but
Kind of more informal usually.
door knocking took me about a week. Yeah, but after about an hour, you're ready to be done. Oh, yeah. I'm done.